I got a brand new pair of runners. And as I was about to throw this into the recycle bin, I thought, maybe I could use it. Definitely, I can use this tissue paper. I use tissue paper all the time in my art. But maybe instead of thinking outside of the box, I could think about the box and find a use for it as well. Join me in this video. I'm going to repurpose the box and this tissue paper that was in the box. So let's work with the tissue paper first. I use tissue paper all the time. I make my own DIY papers. I use it for putting my sentiments on. Now this one is this beautiful antique kind of color. And I thought, why not make some designer tissue paper with this? Now, this tissue paper, while it has the weight of the tissue paper I would buy at dollar store, the colorized part of this does not go translucent or transparent when I glue it down. But that's okay because this will make some interesting designer tissue collage papers. And I love collaging with papers that are super thin. I like the weight of them because it doesn't add bulk to my art journal page or my projects. So here I'm just grabbing some stencils and stamps and putting some pattern down onto these papers. And I'm going to use these collage papers as the initial background, the first couple layers, or I can use rip a strip. You'll see what I mean later on. So here, instead of using black, I'm using navy, and I love the color of the navy with the color of this tissue paper. I'm just going to do several examples here for you. And these are just examples. You are only limited by your imagination, but you can dig out any stamp, any stencil, and put it on the tissue paper. Now, the advantage to doing this at this time is this is a stash builder session. You will do this once, dirty your stencils, do one cleanup, and then you have all these collage papers at the ready to be used when you start creating. And that's going to help you minimize the time it takes for you to do a page because you've got several layers already done here. So I'm just stamping a couple different stamps. This is a great place to use even stamps that are smaller scale. When you put them all on this collage paper, they add to it, and it just adds one more element to your art journal process down the road. So here I'm using my archival ink, and I'm not getting a great or bright dark stamping and stuff, but that's okay. I'm grunging it up. This is very vintage looking, and that's the advantage of this kind of colored paper as opposed to the white tissue paper. So again, I'm using my archival ink. I think I need to get my reinker out, and I switch to black acrylic paint, and I'm brayering that on or using a makeup sponge to put it on the stamp, and that's giving me a much darker stamp. It's usually my preferred way of doing it. It also gives a little bit of texture. Script stamps are great to add. You're just layering it up. Don't overthink this process. I will link other videos where I make DIY tissue papers to use to give you more ideas. But again, use what you have. So here I'm stenciling black onto it. And again, I love that contrast, the color. You get that vintage feel without having to put a base coat of color down because the paper is that color. And again, it's this nice thin collage paper. So there we have some examples of what you can do. But again, you're only limited by your own imagination. Use what you have and make what you have work. So here I've just ripped them and glued them down as to break the page. Look at the color of the background of that tissue paper. It didn't go translucent, but you have that color. So then I thought, you know what? I love making masterboards. And we have this long piece of paper, so I can make a bigger masterboard, which I prefer. I usually use my 11 by 17 copy paper, but I could use this and get the benefit of the color and get the benefit of the thinness. So again, this is just an example, and I did make a video where I create this masterboard showing you every step and explaining every step, and then using this masterboard. And I will link that video. This is very sped up because it's more about grabbing stuff out of the recycle bin and reusing it before, in your art. So again, I'm using DIY mark makers, stamps, some of my stencils. Making a masterboard is all about those layers, but I found that because the base paper, that tissue paper, is so light, I could add more layers to this. And then when I use it as an Insta background on a card or an art journal page, it's not overly heavy and bulky. So I will actually start using Dollar Tree tissue paper as my base for masterboards. So I'm adding tissue paper to this, but I'm adding a lot of layers. I add modeling paste through the stencil. I'm adding napkins here. I'm going to add some book paper in a minute. I add a lot of layers on top. And yet when I went to cut these out to use as Insta backgrounds for my projects, it wasn't bulky. So this is free. It was in the box. So I don't even have to spend the $1.50 at Dollar Tree to get it. Here I'm adding some book paper. And as I said, I will link the video where I discuss every layer of this creation of the masterboard. And then when I take that masterboard and turn it into 4 different projects. This is just, like I said, the very sped up version of it. How to use that tissue paper because you get that large size and you get that thin weight of it. And it held up to all the layers that I put on it still. So, a win on so many levels. So here I've cut them and glued them onto the substrates that I'm going to use. I'm using it as Instabang. And this is the video you need to look for if you want to get all the details. So let's turn our attention to the box. Now, I can use the box as it is to store whatever I want into it, but make it pretty. Why not match your studio or your bedroom or whatever? So, and I'm going to use something that I have an excess amount of, my gel prints. So I'm going to use gel prints to cover the entire box and turn it into a pretty storage system. So I start off and I think, okay, I'm just going to cut this into rectangles and squares along that line. And I'm using the ruler and ripping it in there. You're going to see later, I end up just using scissors. It works just as well. And you really don't need to do this all ahead. You can kind of do it as you go. But I do recommend getting several papers out that all go together. So I'm in the blue zone. I've got blues and teals and aquas. I picked that because A, I have a gazillion gel prints in that color scheme. And B, it works in my studio. It matches the color. I'm using decoupage, but you could use Mod Podge I would prefer, if I was doing this again, I like the finish of my fluid matte medium, but I want to use up this container. It's something I bought when I was teaching a class and I just want to get rid of it. I want to stop storing it, but I don't want to waste it. So I'm just putting a coat of whatever adhesive you want to use underneath and on top. And I start and I'm trying to carefully plan it out and organize it. And you know what? My recommendation, don't overthink it. Start layering it up. If there's too big of a space, you can always go in and put another layer of it. You have lots of gel prints. Let's use those up. Now, the other thing is I'm trying to put the paper, the collage papers, the gel prints right to the edge. What I would do differently if I was doing this again, I would paint the edge either black or the dark blue so that I don't have to go right to the edge because some of that was lifting off later and I had to make sure that it was all glued down. And I think maybe over time that's still going to come off. So I would just paint, an inch around the top and the sides and the bottom so that I don't have to go so close to the edge. Does that make sense? I hope I've saved you some time and effort. When you're picking your gel prints, contrast, some that are darker, some that are lighter, some that have black, white. I even put in on each side some gel prints that have the blue, the teal, but with a little bit of red. So there's red on each side, just as a contrasting color. I'm not going to show you me doing all the sides of the box, but I do cover all of them. And as I went, this is where I learned not to be overthinking it because it really didn't matter. The ones that I carefully laid out ahead of time and thought about didn't look any better than the ones where I just kind of cut as I went and glued it down. And there you see, I'm just cutting it, piecing it, cutting it, piecing it. And there you can see some navy or teal or with the red. And I, of course, saved my favorite gel prints for the top of it because that's what you're going to see the most. And there we have the cover. Now, the sides here, I could have continued and done gel prints, but I thought, you know what? That's way too finicky for me. It's this narrow little area. I just didn't want to do it. So I just grabbed my bright aqua paint and my Prussian blue and I just applied it quickly with a makeup sponge. And I really like that. It's more of a solid and makes a nice contrast to the busyness of the collaged cover of the boxes. I did not gesso it beforehand, was totally unnecessary. The cardboard stands up to the layers of Mod Podge or the layers of decoupage that I put on there and the paint. I've had no problems at all. If you have lots of shoe boxes, you can make one for each color and then store all your gel prints in there. Later on, you'll see what I'm going to store in there or what I think I might store in there and where I'm going to keep it in my studio and what it looks like. So if you're looking for a way to use your gel prints, this might be it. It used up a few. I've got a couple other shoe boxes that I think will get similar treatment. Now, to make everything kind of meld together a little bit more, I decided to do some overall stamping and I'm just using my script stamp. So here I'm using black acrylic paint that I'm brayering on to a nice script stamp and stamping it on. And it goes right across all the different gel prints with all the different patterns and it kind of melds them all together, kind of makes it cohesive in some regard. And I like that look. But if you don't like this, you could do some stenciling on top of it if that's what you want to do. I did attempt to do some stenciling. I just didn't like the effect of it. There you go. I'm loving the look of this. And I do the sides. I've done all the sides like this, even though I'm not showing you all of it. And then you have to stop and take the time to dry it because you're doing all the different sides. I'm not worried about whether my script stamp is upside down or sideways. This is just patterning that's going on there. The black is adding contrast a little bit. And then I decide to add more contrast. This time I'm using white acrylic paint and the same script stamp. I could have used maybe some text stamp or number stamp with the black and that used a different one. So next time I might do that. But I don't mind using the same stamp with two different colors. Sometimes you can go to a shoe store and ask them if they have any shoe boxes that they are getting rid of that you can just get. Or ask your friends, right? Everybody's throwing them in the recycle bin. You can benefit. And with just a little bit of time, cover it up, make it pretty. Wouldn't this look nice, even if it's in your closet behind closed doors? And then I'm doing the trim as well, making everything work together. What I could have done, I could have painted the trim all just the navy color and had a solid rim to it. Again, these are ideas. I want you to take what I'm showing you and expand on it. Use the color scheme you love. Look at all that detail. Now, to just finish it off, I am edging around all the sides of the box, the four sides of every side. I'm using my angle brush and black acrylic paint. I just think this, again, finishes it off. Just that little bit extra. Now, if you're wondering, can I do this and do this as a background on an art journal page? You absolutely can. Take your gel prints, cut them into different size squares and rectangles, glue them down, add some stamping and stenciling and a focal image and a sentiment, and you've got your art journal page. And I did contemplate turning the cover into kind of a page, but I decided, you know what? I'm going the simple route this time. And then I'm grabbing some of my gold paint and I'm splattering gold again on each side, drying in between because once there's splatters, you got to give it drying time or you're just going to smear it. So that took a little bit of time. I was watching something on TV and going back every 10 minutes and splattering another side. Look at that. I am in love with it. And I decided, you know what? I'm going to do some faux stitching around the edge of all the sides. At first I said I'm only going to do the top. I ended up doing all of them. This fine line applicator bottle I love for doing this kind of detail work or doodling on my page. I just put, this is regular Liquitex Basics white paint that I have thinned to the right consistency. And the hard part is here, you want to make sure you're drying in parts so that you're not putting your wrist in something that's wet. So I did stop and dry where my wrist is resting right now. And because I did that shading around the edge, it's popping because it's really on a dark area. Don't want to do this, you can use a Posca pen if you don't have a fine line applicator, although I highly recommend getting one. And there is the finished box. I love it. Looks so much better than the shoebox in its plain state. And I used up stuff that was just sitting there being stored. So I could put sentiments in here. I could put some of my storage containers in here, paints, pretty much anything. Here I can put some journals on the go. All my journals that I can grab out, they will fit. This box is big enough to fit a variety of things. I could put my smaller substrates, my 4x4s, canvas boards, tags, ATCs. That would keep them all in one place and pretty at the same time. But what I'm going to keep in here are some gel prints. The gel prints, a good handful of gel prints. This is from my last gel print session. I'll link that video. But I find that if I keep them closer at hand, not in my filing cabinet, I tend to use them more. So that's kind of where I'm going to go with this for now. I'm just putting in my gel prints, all the colors, so I can just grab the box, flip through, grab a gel print or two to use. And it's handy, but it's contained. And don't forget those tissue papers that we did some work on. This would also be a great way to store those tissue papers and flip through them. I definitely need to make another box for just the tissue papers. So here are examples of where it can sit and how it looks in your studio. This goes well with the color scheme I've got. The baskets from Dollar Tree can sit on it. I've got storage, but it looks pretty. And why not? So grab your gel prints, grab a shoebox, and go get creative. Until next time, go get busy.